so much for joining us at our 9th annual Startup Boston Week. Our mission with this conference is simple: to bring together the entire startup community across every industry, department, and funding stage. Startup Boston exists to connect, educate, and celebrate this ecosystem while serving as a trusted, unbiased guide to the best resources that can help you start and scale your startup or your team. My name is Elena Lobianco. I'm a consultant with TriNet, where we support startups and small businesses scale their HR infrastructure compliantly and confidently. I will be your hostess this morning. Before we dive into this amazing panel that I'm so excited to kick off, I wanted to give a huge thank you to Suffolk University. Suffolk has generously partnered with us for the last 3 years, providing the space in kind because of their deep commitment to supporting Boston's startup community. So if you're interested in exploring entrepreneurship, they offer a variety of programs and opportunities. They are tabling right outside on this floor in the vendor hall, so be sure to stop by their table to learn how they can support your journey or how you can get involved supporting their entrepreneurial students as well. This session today is preventing burnout in startups. If that was not on your schedule, you may want to reevaluate your seat, but I highly recommend you stay in it because we have a wonderful panel. Sandra Ma will be our moderator. I will kick it over to her to get started. Thank you so much and enjoy the session.
All right, let's give it up again for our MC, Elena.
Thank you.
Yeah, and also just the wonderful Startup Boston Week crew for making this event possible, that we could actually all be here today for free. So again, I'm Sandra Ma, and I'm so happy to be here, and I'm happy that you all are here to join us as well, because you know what? You didn't have to be here. You actually all chose to be here. So thank you to all of you that are here in person, and then those folks joining us online as well. We appreciate you. And so as Elena said, we're here to talk about burnout. And so as I was reflecting and thinking about this panel, I kind of went through a self-discovery moment, and I came to a couple of realizations. The first was that, I actually didn't really know what burnout was until recently in the last few years. So my entire first half of my career, I really didn't know what burnout was, which led me to my second realization, which was I realized that I actually burned out in my very first job out of college, and I didn't even know it. I didn't know anything about burnout. And so rewind a bunch of years to my very to college years, okay, so a lot of years. And so I'm doing all the things that society expects of you. I went to a so-called good college. I got that coveted investment banking internship my junior year. I got the full-time offer at the end of the summer. And so I was golden, right? Like senior year, I was coasting. I remember taking a jogging class, actually, so it was pretty low pressure. And then I graduated. I got that expensive piece of paper, and then the full-time job started, right? And yes, you all know, reality set in. And so at that time, the economy was tanking, and I was exhausted. I went into work before 7 a.m., and I left in the wee hours of the morning, all wearing business formal attire, by the way. And I was yelled at pretty much every single day in my job. And I had not one, not two, but I actually had 3 bosses, believe it or not, that I reported to. And so, I think about that job, and that really truly was one of the most stressful jobs that I had ever had in my entire career. Now, the funny thing is, I thought that was completely normal. I thought that was simply adulthood, and that I was going to be miserable for the rest of my adult life, because that's what they told me growing up. But really, I just had never heard about burnout. And so where I want to start us off today is really getting on the same page on the definition of burnout, because I think if we were to survey the room and ask people, how do you define burnout? We would probably get a lot of different answers. So we've got to be speaking the same language. And so, even though I didn't know what burnout was until recently, burnout isn't really a new topic. So it actually came about in the 1970s, really more so talking about caring professions when you think about healthcare, education, doctors, nurses, those types of professions. And only in the last decade did it really become more relevant in the corporate space and startups with this hustle culture, all the technology we have now that allows us to be always on and working 24/7, right? And so not until 2019 did the World Health Organization actually officially recognize burnout. And, after that, the pandemic really exacerbated burnout as well. And so the World Health Organization, in their 11th revision of the International Classification of Diseases, the ICD-11, if you will, if you want some light bedtime reading later this evening, they say burnout is an occupational phenomenon, and it should not be applied to describe experiences in other areas of life. Hold that thought. We're going to come back to that. I think we got a bone to pick with that one. But what is the actual definition? So the World Health Organization says burnout is defined as follows. It is a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed, and it's characterized by 3 dimensions. All right, the first one is feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion. The second is increased mental distance from one's job, or feelings of negativism or cynicism related to one's job. And the third is reduced professional efficacy. Now, I want you all to kind of marinate on that for a little bit and reflect in the next few seconds on your own experience. And give me a show of hands, give me a head nod, folks online, chat amongst yourselves. Who here has experienced burnout at some point within their career? Pretty much everyone in the room, right? Who's experiencing burnout right now as we speak? We're here for you. All right, this session's for you. But as you can see, you are not alone. We've all been through this, or we're going through this right now. And so I'm, really privileged to be in the company of this expert panel that's going to share their perspectives and experiences, not only about how do you even identify burnout and how do you prevent it, but if you're in it right now, how do you get out of it? And so we want you to take away clear actions that as soon as you walk out this door, as soon as you sign up from the session, that you are going to know exactly what you need to do for your next steps, right? And so, lastly, this session is for all of you, right? We're here for you, ask questions, and chances are if you have a question, somebody else has it as well. And so last 15 minutes or so, we'll have plenty of time for you guys to do Q&A. And so without further ado, I do want to introduce our panel. I'm going to start over with Allison Campbell down there. I'm going to do Allison C and Allison M because we got 2 of them over here, but they're going to tell us their background. And then I want each of you to go through and tell us some kind of perspective or experience that you have related to burnout.
Great. Thanks, Sandra. So excited to be here. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Allison Campbell. I'm the founder of a company called Unburnt. Unsurprisingly, founded after my own burnout experience. And so we'll talk more about that later on in the panel. I think, Sandra, you hit the nail on the head. I could share the gruesome details of my burnout experience, but what I really wanted to start us off with today was not my own experience, but what I've learned in doing this work is that actually my experience was not that unique. Sorry, I'm trying not to hunch over, but that's not working, so I'm gonna have to hunch away. My experience was actually not that unique, and I think, okay, thank you. Everyone can hear me, right? Okay, cool. And, I think it's really, when we think about burnout and chronic stress, we're going to get into the drivers. We're going to talk about how to really identify it in ourselves, in our teams. For me, I'm really looking at this and seeing the patterns across organizations, in conversations, even here this week at Startup Boston. This is really one of the biggest organizational threats I think we're facing today. And so rather than share, my very personal experience, which I'm happy to do, come find me, let's swap stories after, that's really where I wanted to kick us off today.
Great, thank you, Allison. My name is Morgan Mosier. I am the Director of Workplace at Fern Gully, a very new role, so that's why it's not there, because my most recent experience with burnout happened this summer. So I actually was on short-term disability for a few months to re-find myself, get back to it, and here I am. So this is me back, recovered from burnout with freshly bleached hair. So you can tell when you find yourself in burnout, you might be in your bathroom with a glass of wine and a bottle of peroxide, and that's when you know it's time to get help. So I'm really glad to be here.
That's hard to follow, and your hair looks great, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
That's me. I'm Allison McLeod. I am the Chief Marketing Officer at Flywire. Actually, Flywire is a formerly Boston startup. We are now a public company. So I lead our marketing, RevOps, and then also a sales organization there. So while my role has not been in focusing on entire workforces, I have been leading teams for several years, and this is definitely an area that is a passion of mine of how do we make sure that we're creating great work environments for folks to do their best works, feel fulfilled. My own personal experience with burnout was probably about 9 years ago. And I was returning from work after maternity leave with my second son. And I just kept, it was sort of the conundrum of like, need to prove myself, need to do everything, need to be the perfect mom. And I found myself at work one day feeling like at the moment, I thought I was having a heart attack or something awful was happening. And I went to the hospital and said, like, something bad's happening in my body, I don't know what's happening. And they said, you're having a panic attack. And it was at that moment I realized that I needed to figure out how to help with the anxiety, how to make sure I was setting the right boundaries and building a more healthy relationship with both work and home.
Thank you, Allison. And once again, I'm Sandra Ma. I spent many years in large corporates and then eventually moved to startups where I was leading product teams. And then after all that experience, what I realized was actually everything is pretty much the same wherever you go. And it comes down to people and their ability to get along with each other. So hello, we're all adults. Adults are just tax-paying children, as they say. And so that led me to start Jovial. And Jovial is all about how do we actually build more joyful, impactful workplaces where people can be at their best. And, ultimately we design collaboration standards and expectations where you can achieve your goals and then not burn out. And so everybody's happy. And so to really get straight to the point, I really want to hit hard in the beginning here of like, why do we even care? Why are we here? And why should teams and organizations and ourselves really care about burnout? And what are the risks if we don't address it? And so actually, Allison, I'm going to start with you down there.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it absolutely impacts us all as individuals at some stage in our career. As Sandra mentioned, we are always on, and with each new tech advance, we're sold this bill of goods that it's supposed to make our lives easier, but actually we just keep backfilling with more, right? So it's relentless. Our calendars are packed, we're in back-to-back meetings, and individually, we'll get into more of the signs and symptoms, kind of what to look out for. But I think, the definition is one we can all probably recognize at some point, right? That feeling of exhaustion, that sort of foggy thinking. You feel like you're walking through life, your meetings, in a bit of a haze. And I think the important point, the risk, of course, for us individually to our well-being is staggering. And so again, we'll talk more about that specifically. But I think for companies, it's something that we really have to care about because it's not just about somebody tapping out. And I think that's sort of a confusing part. When we think about burnout, we think, it's the person that doesn't care. It's the quiet quitter. But actually, the research, so much more studies are being done post-COVID about what burnout actually is, what it looks like, how it shows up. And it's actually top performers. It's the people who do care, right? And we're in this state of chronic stress where cognitively, we're not showing up and doing our best work, right? So when we think about the risk to companies, it's not, it's someone who's leaving anyway, we'll just hire the next person. No, this is a silent threat, right, that's lurking under the surface. People often don't feel safe to raise their hand and say, I'm overwhelmed, right? We're still in an environment where layoffs are happening all the time. We just saw what happened with Salesforce, right? The promise of AI, and then we're going to backfill with more. What does this mean for my job? It doesn't feel safe to say, I've got too much on my plate. So folks are suffering in silence. And when we think about chronic stress and physiologically what's happening, I'll just say it again, we're not showing up doing our best work. We're not empathetic. We're not able to collaborate well, right? And so the things that are going to drive innovation and those big breakthroughs for companies, not happening. Folks are on autopilot. So I think just want to kick it off there. We're going to dig more in, but it is a risk for companies. It's not sort of a nice to have, we'll think about burnout one day. It is one of the biggest threats to companies today.
Yeah, thank you, Allison. And I think to build on that, because you mentioned, the high performers are the ones with the highest risk. I think, Morgan, can you share from your perspective, what does that mean for companies and thinking about their impact and reaching their goals?
Yeah, absolutely. So I girl bossed way too close to the sun. So I was that high performer that wanted to make sure I was, always raising my hand, always signing up for more, always saying, yes, I can do it, I can do it. And as soon as I personally suffered from my burnout experience, I no longer was doing that. And so that's what our startups are at risk of, is those really big players, the ones that are innovating, the ones that are changing and moving the needle for their company, no longer are raising their hand. They're no longer safe to have those great ideas or bring something new to the table because they mentally and physically can't. So they get quiet in meetings. They stop saying yes to more. They stop coming up with the idea that maybe your company needed to get to that next level, to get that next round of funding. All of that is now no longer on the table because your top performer, who was your shining star, your differentiator, is dull. And so we as founders and the employers, it's on us to make sure we keep polishing our stars. And that is something that we do with proper programming and good support and leading, and I know it's so cliche, but really from the top down there, because employee culture is a mirror. So if you're not doing it, then your employees are not going to feel safe to do it for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Allison, for you, having led teams for so many years, how does that look like if you have a team that's burned out or there's low morale? What are the implications that you've seen?
I think a lot of what Allison said as well, right? Like it becomes more widespread. And I think, oftentimes it's easy to think, they're just not into it anymore. We'll find someone else. But you usually see it show up with your high performers, right? So once someone goes quiet, that's when I know there's a problem. Like the people who are usually the ones that are talking in the meetings or checking in or following up that start just seeming more apathetic, that there's a problem. I think as leaders, right, there's always, obviously, every company exists to drive growth, to drive revenue, to be profitable. That's never going to change. But as leaders, it's our job to make sure that we are being incredibly clear with what the priorities are. Oftentimes when I find someone's really burnt out, it's typically because they're overwhelmed with this to-do list. And when you dig into it, 75% of our stuff, it's like, this isn't really a priority. But there's this inherent sort of, to the points made prior, right, of like, but I have to, it's been asked of me, I can't say no, I have to say yes. So I think making it safe, like you can say no, and it's not that is way easier said than done, and it's a constant practice. And no one likes to make other departments or people mad and say, I'm not doing it. But what you find is people are like an inch deep across 100 different things and not doing good at anything, right? So they don't feel fulfilled. They're not showing up well. They're not performing well. And you see that have a ripple effect.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one thing I like to think about is multitasking. People always talk about multitasking growing up, and it was seen as a positive thing. But in my mind, there's no such thing as multitasking. You're actually just context switching and actually doing pretty mediocre on everything. So remember that. And I think we're going to talk a lot more about the prioritization piece too, because I think that's a big thing that is often overlooked when people talk about burnout. So hold that thought. I actually want to go back and revisit the definition of burnout again, because World Health Organization, they're official, that's great, but I think we can do better and really drill down on exactly what we're talking about. What does burnout feel like and look like? And so what I want to do is break it down in both the physical manifestation of like what are the symptoms that you see with burnout, and then also really like the mental, emotional as well. And so let's start off with the physical symptoms. And I think, Allison, I'll start off with you again here.
Yeah, great. So I think we talked about the classic definition, exhaustion, cynicism, which is actually a really tricky one. And in doing this work, I've realized how many people actually don't associate that with burnout, right? But it's that feeling of negativity, right? You're sitting in meetings and you're thinking, what's the point of this? Are we having the same conversation again, right? So it is a classic sign, but one to kind of look out for. That self-efficacy piece. This one's also really hard because it's the I'm showing up, I'm trying really hard, I'm exhausted, maybe I'm making some mistakes. So you start to question, am I even good at my job? Those are things to look out for, those little questions, that self-doubt definitely can be a sign of burnout. But I think it's really hard. It's not a diagnosis. You can't go to the doctor and get blood work and then get that piece of paper to say, yep, you're in burnout. And so I think it becomes very squishy. And it's really important, I think, to take notice. The first part is, are you feeling tired and just walking through that fog over a period of time? Was it a really big project week and then you had a great weekend of rest, maybe you had some nice dinners with friends and you feel rejuvenated, or are you stuck in that perpetual cycle of really feeling exhausted? So it's really noticing. But I think because it's not that diagnosis, that blood work, that definitive you're in burnout, it's really important to just state it looks and feels very different. You can have 5 people and you can have 5 different experiences. So I think it's also really important to take notice, really trust your instincts. One of the things I did in my last experience, because I've had more than one burnout experience, but in my last spectacular burnout experience was normalizing stomach aches, right? Really rationalizing, well, this is just what being a busy working mom looks and feels like. And I totally ignored the instinct I had that something was wrong, right? So I think it's important that if you're having that feeling of self-doubt, you need to take a break, right? Trust your instinct. If you feel a physical symptom, go to the doctor. It's important, not everything can be mapped back to, well, I'm just stressed out, because the problem is then we ignore it. So it's important both to root out and really make sure there isn't something else going on, right? If there's no other chronic illness or, something else that we're just also rationalizing as, well, this is just what I signed up for. But if there is nothing, if you do get that clean bill of health, that is your sign that this is unsustainable, right? And so it might be a sign that actually you are in a state of burnout.
Yeah, no, we are not medical professionals, and I think a lot of
Yes,
the things too,
yes.
a lot of the symptoms can be overlapping with so many other things, depression, anxiety, you mentioned panic attacks, like there's so many things, but I think to Allison's point, we really just need to be self-aware of ourselves and like what does normal state actually mean for us if we are able to actually figure out, are we burnt out or not, right? And so Morgan, you had a pretty recent experience, if you could share like some of the physical symptoms that you manifested for you.
Yeah, sure. So I am also a founder. So I was working full-time and being a founder on the side. And I'm a mom of 2. So those 3 things kind of very similar to Allison. I was thinking this is just what normal things, this is normal life. This is what being a grown-up feels like. And then I started passing out, like literally walking and then passed out. And then getting up and then passing out again. And it was my autoimmune system literally shutting down on me, and realizing that it very much was tied to stress, and that the amount of stress was not tied to a specific instance, where that I think is a big differentiator, that it's not just tied to a project. No matter how much rest, that constant state of stress didn't go away. And so that was when I talked to my doctor and I was put on short-term disability, which is an option for a lot of people that you might not know. Like that, and that's what your human resources professional can help you with. Don't be ashamed to use those resources that are there for you, because ultimately you are a good employee, and if you want to be there for the long run, you have to take care of yourself. So if that means you need to let go of some short-term wins, saying no to some of those short-term projects, being okay with letting some of those things go, it will ultimately be better for you professionally in the long run. And so that's what I did. And thankfully, I've been working very hard for a long time and reached out to a colleague or someone that I was really familiar with his company, and I sort of presented an idea and said, hey, I really missed what I was doing when I was workplace consulting, and I would love to help build your business arm of building this out. But this is kind of where I'm at. And is this something that I can do for your company, but recognize that I have strict boundaries now, and this is kind of what that is? Are you game? Because if you're game, you get my all with these boundaries set. And Kevin agreed, and so now I'm at this new company, Fern Gully, which really allows me to shine when I'm ready to shine and allows me to turn off when I need to turn off. And I think that ultimately saved me professionally.
Thank you, Morgan.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, Allison, you were talking about this a little bit earlier too, if you can touch on some of the mental emotional symptoms as well that come along with burnout. And then I wanted to go back to the whole occupational phenomenon piece where burnout should only be referring to kind of workplace as opposed to whole life, and kind of get your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah. So I think from you mentioned sort of like mental, physical symptoms. So for me, a lot of that's like shakiness, nervousness. It's the doom scrolling. It's the inability to like close your laptop and put it away. But you also find like, after a while, like you're not being productive at all. You're overthinking, you're ruminating, you're worried about everything. Back to the multitasking. It's context with like, there are days, actually this still happens. There are days I'll open it and be like, there's like 112 tabs open, and I'm thinking I'm working on all of these things at once right now, not possible. So I think that's one. I also think, there's so many, we continue to normalize life, and if you think of the last 5 years, like, it has not been normal by any stretch, right? So I think us as humans, it's like, go through the motions. Yeah, this is weird, global pandemic, working at home, never leaving your house. This is totally fine, just keep working. Like, how many people here, like in COVID, like, probably didn't take a day off? I remember like forcing people to take time off that year, and like that's when you sort of saw it spike, right? There was like loneliness, there was feeling confined, there was mental health crises, and I think we've continued to just plow through and pretend that everything's okay. I think unfortunately there's still a big stigma around mental health, as much as we'd love to say there's not, there is. And unfortunately I think, I think it's wonderful that it's more exposed than ever in a workplace setting and more of society, but that wasn't the case. And I think a lot of people still struggle to come forward with it because they're afraid that if they say, I'm not okay, I'm burnt out, that it's going to mean like, then I'm going to replace you, right? And that's often not the case. You're high performers, you want to keep high performing. So it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, it comes down to, we got to stop going through the motions. We have to slow down, be aware, stop being, we're becoming like the little AI robots. Like we're humans, and we gotta, it's not Blade Runner yet. I always think about that movie when I see all the AI posts. But I think that the other thing I wanted to note, I think all three of you had mentioned this too, in terms of burnout, it's kind of differentiate it from stress versus burnout is like, burnout doesn't really go away.
Right.
And I think about like you go to the gym and you're like, yeah, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to get a good workout in. And the next couple days you're sore. And it's good because your muscles have teared and they're going to rebuild. You're going to be stronger the next time around. But then you go to the gym and you overdo it. Like you kind of get overly ambitious, and then you're in pain, and in pain for weeks, and maybe you have to go to the doctor and you've injured yourself, right? And so that's how I think about burnout too, is like burnout doesn't go away, right? If you go away for a weekend, like Alice was mentioning, you go on vacation, you're like, thank goodness I have my vacation. I'm going to be away for a week. I should feel better. But then you go back next week to work and you're like, existential crisis is back. We're back to fatigue and dread, You all know what I'm talking about. That's the difference between burnout and stress. And I think in terms of like, we talk about this whole occupational phenomenon thing with the World Health Organization with their burnout definition. I think in reality, like work is a part of life, right? And so burnout, we all have different responsibilities. People are caretakers or parents. We have a lot of things going on. And it's really just unrealistic to think about it and apply it only in this, work environment, right? And so now what I want to do is go through, we talked about the signs, we talked about the symptoms and what it looks like, but what actually causes burnout and getting the root, because if we don't understand what causes it, we can never fix it, right? And so I want to split this down into kind of the individual causes, some of the things that we can control ourselves. And, sometimes we are our worst critics. We self-inflict on ourselves. So we'll talk about those, how to address them, and share some experiences. Then I want to talk about kind of organizational at work from a leadership perspective, from a team cultural perspective. How do those contribute to burnout, and what can we do about that? So let's start with the individual causes. And, maybe Allison, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I think on a personal level, and I'll give again my perspective. One, it's started with the inability to set boundaries, both at home and at work. Right? It's like, sure, I'll do that. Yep, I'll do it. I also found myself like signing up for stuff that I knew I didn't have time to do. It's like, I have to be a present mom, so sign up for coaching and after school stuff. I'm like, when the heck am I going to do that? So you find yourself in this moment where you're like, I have so many things to do and I don't want to do any of them. And then what that leads to, canceling, then feeling guilty, or doing it as well, and then saying like, not worth my time. So I think you start to see it manifest that way. I think the same thing at work, right, is that it's the continuing to take on stuff that, one, you may not want to do, you're not good at, like it's not bringing you fulfillment either. And if you're not fulfilled, like that is going to even just more so drive you into burnout, right? If you don't love what you're doing, and I know that a lot of times it's a dream to like love what you're doing every day. It's impossible for us as humans, right? We have emotions and things change, but that makes it incredibly hard if you're overwhelmed by your to-do list. So I think it goes back to like, how do you learn to advocate for yourself? Setting boundaries is probably one of the most powerful things I've learned, because I think I inherently always believed that like setting boundaries and saying no was bad, right? You're letting people down, you're missing opportunity, but then you realize it's one of the most powerful things you can do, because one, it gets you to better focus. Two, if you notice, the people who don't set boundaries, and this was myself for a very long time, who are the people that always get sort of like taken advantage of the doormat? Oh, Allison will do it. Oh, she'll do it. She'll do it. She'll do it. She never says no, right? It actually doesn't help you get ahead. Like I always thought, like I say yes, I do it, I get ahead. It doesn't. You just end up taking everyone's stuff, right? And then you're not actually focused on the stuff you want to be doing. So I think setting those boundaries and being clear and being unapologetic for them, like that's incredible. It's so hard, but it's so incredibly important. And you will be respected for it. Like I watch people who set strong boundaries. I often get very jealous. But you'll see that boundary and you'll see people try to hit it. And then it's like, nope, I can't do it after 6. This is what I'm committed to after 6. I'm with my family, I'm this. And other people get frustrated, right? Because they're not getting what they want. But it doesn't make them disrespect them anymore, right? In fact, I think, again, that becomes like you're taking back your power. So more easily said than done for sure. But I think like learning how to set those boundaries is so important.
Yeah, I mean, to your point on priorities too, it's kind of a mix of those, setting those boundaries, but also what's important to you,
Yep.
and being very clear on that and sticking to it, right? Like not, just this one time, I'm going to do this one thing, right? Because then that's when things get fuzzy and then you end up burning yourself out.
I think the best tip I ever learned, my therapist I had years ago said to me, like, when you get asked something, before you say a word, ask to yourself, like, do I want to do this? And if your gut says no, don't do it. Right? Do not say yes. So that was a good trick. It's actually helped quite a bit.
I love that. Yeah, Allison.
So I'm going to jump in and I'm going to maybe say something that's a little controversial. I think, yes, I have learned as a former perfectionist, people pleaser, I always wanted to say yes. But I think, and I know we're kind of getting there, but I just want to jump in now. I think it's really hard to do that when you're in an environment, in a company that doesn't accept boundaries. Like I really feel like that's an important part of the conversation, that so much of the drivers of burnout inherently are the ways we're working. And as leaders, potentially there's a lack of clarity, there's a lack of communication, right? Folks don't understand how their work ladders up. We're spending all day long in meetings and we're wasting cycles, right? There's siloed thinking. So I just want to say that in case we run out of time and I don't get to say it, it's not a personal failure. It's just so incredibly important that we understand that, yes, there are things we can do individually to help mitigate, really recognize signs and patterns of stress, but there's this narrative that it's the guilt, it's the I couldn't keep up. I set boundaries in my last role, and then I had an executive flying in after a meeting that, by the way, I was triple booked. Why weren't you in my meeting? So it's really hard when you're in that kind of environment to not just set the boundary, but really have them be upheld and maintained. So I just want to say that and jump in that I know we're going to get further into the drivers inside the organization, but even if you're trying, it is not a failure personally if you feel burnt out. It is sort of our society, the system that we're all in, that's letting us down.
It's the matrix. Yeah, we're
Very
stuck in the
true.
matrix. And so I think and that's a good point of the societal pressures, how we think corporate life should be, the expectations, and I think generationally, depending on who's in leadership, right, that really drives a lot of how people expect others to do work, how hard they expect them, and how much, right, it's like the hustle culture. I think I've seen far too many job descriptions where it's like, roll up your sleeve. Are you ready to roll up your sleeves and do whatever it takes? And there's like 30 bullet points in a job description, right? That's where you do have control and you say, no, like I'm better than this, right? But Morgan, tell us more about we can mix in the organization because
Yeah.
you're right. They kind of like merge together.
Sure. From a company perspective, too, we can kind of talk through some signs that you might be burning out your employees or things that you might be doing that are causing burnout. Just like what you were saying, that work hard, play hard. We no, please, and then forced family fun, right? That's all the stuff that we're dealing with. But I think setting all, when you're thinking about from a company perspective, how many KPIs do you have? Are there too many? Oftentimes that seems to be something that causes this pressure from your team is maybe you have 20 or more KPIs that you're getting measured on, but really are all of those key performance indicators actually moving your needle? Because if they're not, they're just putting arbitrary pressure on your team for what? So you have something good to update during a board meeting or something. So we really need to think about and I think we will when we start chatting through some priorities. But that seems to be a big thing that I've seen from a company perspective or from a team perspective that trickles down to causing that burnout. Additionally, you see all sorts of with those teams and how they're getting measured, and that seems to be something that really does trigger and drive that. And for example, all of the processes put in place seem to be causing a lot of burnout. Processes are great, but startups tend to follow strictly this new process that was put in place, and maybe that the process is actually causing more work for your team, and it might not actually be improving things. So for one of my more recent burnout examples, I had to track my time down to a 15-minute. What was I doing every 15-minute increments, and what project does this tie back to, and which cost center does it allocate to, and all of those sorts of things. I would find myself at the end of the day after working a 12-hour day, then trying to catch up my timesheet to make sure I was allocating it right to each cost center or all of those sorts of things, spending an additional 3 hours digging deep into a process that is really not moving the company needle. So I just think from a leadership perspective, we really need to think about those asks that we're asking our team and if it really is impacting the greater good.
I love processes, but that one's
No,
terrible.
I love
right? That
processes.
one's terrible.
I know it's
I
hard.
mean, that's kind of an extreme micromanagement, big brother type of thing. We don't like that. But some processes can actually help. And I think that's what some of you have been alluding to, too, is that within an organization, if you put in the standards that are actually going to help people do their jobs, that's
exactly.
kind of the point, right? And I think priorities is a big theme here too, right? Whether it's individual priorities or organizational priorities, right? I think a lot of the times that issues come up is goals aren't clear, right? Priorities aren't clear. Allison, I think you probably have a lot of experience with this.
Yeah, so I mean, I think a few things that, and I'll speak from the Flywire perspective, is we try to make sure that those company priorities are clear for everyone and that cascades down to each department and each individual's goals. But of course, all good plans, right? So I think it's a constant effort. I know I look at my role, right? My role as a leader is I am responsible for everyone on my team, whether they directly report to me or not. So can I say across the board that there's no one burnt out? No, of course not, right? But I am mindful of the fact that like that's a place that we've got to do better. And part of it is really making sure that the priorities are super clear and encouraging people to say like, look at your day. I mean, I will say, like, I will meet with people who directly report to me, and these are senior leaders, and they'll go through some stuff. I'm like, who told you to do that? Why are you doing that? And it's like, someone asked me, I have to do it. I'm like, no, you don't, right? So back to the point, yes, there are companies where it's like, you can't say no, and it's a leader's job to make sure they are helping people prioritize and fighting those battles for their teams to say, these are our priorities, right? That's often where it gets misled is, part of my role of the three I have here is leading a marketing team. Most companies, and this is, I feel across every B2B company, thinks marketing does everything. Everyone's a marketer. Hey, I just need this one thing. It's super quick. Just design this for me. AI did this for me. Fix it, right? Write this. I did this. So it's just like, can't you just get that person to do that one thing? It's like, no, because one morphs into 2,500. So a leader's job is to make sure that you are putting the priorities in place for your team and checking in to understand and making sure those goals are clear. Because I will say, like, guilty, right? Like when I will meet with different people across the org, across my organization, you'll chat with people and you're like, they're not clear. It's like, I'm doing all this, but why? Like, what does this actually go to? And you're like, that's a problem. And I take accountability for that. Like, they should know the work they're doing and how it impacts. So I do think from a leadership, from a manager, like what you're saying yes to is just as important as what you're saying no, but noted that it is very hard if you're not in a leadership position to be the one that says, nah, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. Like, this is where leadership is accountable to making sure that they are setting the right guardrails for their teams and the right priorities.
Yeah, and I think, again, this is so important. And that's an example, right? Like Allison's leadership is a good example of what you should do, right? Is you make sure things are clear, you have that clarity for your team, and that they understand the why of what they're doing, right? Because if people don't understand the why, then they have no sense of purpose, right? And that goes back to the individual piece of they need to have a sense of purpose, otherwise that contributes to burnout. They don't have to love their job,
Right.
but at least it's like, why am I doing it?
Yep.
And then I think just to wrap up this section on the causes, I think the one thing we wanted to touch on too is related to the purpose piece, right? I think like motivation and all of that is super important. And of course, there are jobs that you're just going to be doing some tedious work. It's just every job has tedious work, but it really comes down to the people. And then what are the other supplemental things that your manager or your leadership team is helping you with to discover about yourself and develop your career that's going to take you in a certain direction so that it feels like you're moving somewhere, right? You don't want to feel like you're stagnant. And so I would say on the individual side, it's kind of purpose, priorities is a big thing, and then the perspective. And I think we talked about guilt, right? Not kind of like telling ourselves these stories in our head. And then on the organizational side, we talked about being very clear on goals, priorities. Again, super important. But then also related to that, the roles, right? Whose job is to do what? So many times, so many companies, so many startups, everyone does everything, then no one does anything, right? Like we can't do that. And then I think expectations, it kind of all goes down to we got to do the standards, we got to define things, and we have to care about our people too.
Yeah, Sandra, I just want to add one point. I know we're wrapping up here to take questions, but I think, Allison, you mentioned earlier, companies exist to deliver revenue, profit, right? We're creating value. And I think just connecting the two pieces you just said, the purpose, the happiness, right? Not every minute of every day are you going to maybe be happy in every task. However, I think it's really important to state, if you're asking what's the business case, beyond just we want our people to be well, there was a study, I kind of stumbled upon this a few months ago, University of Oxford demonstrated that the correlation between well employees, happy employees, not stressed out employees actually drove an outperformance in the stock market, right? It helped to create more value, and those companies were more profitable. So, I think just kind of tying it all together, when there is that purpose, it's not only creating happier employees, it's actually delivering results.
Exactly, yeah.
Absolutely. I think, at the bottom line is people cannot do their best work when they don't feel at their best, right? And so naturally, we want our employees to be at their best. We want all of you to be at your best. And so before we transition to questions, first I want another round of applause for this panel, for all of their great expertise. And then ground rules for Q&A. If you're going to ask a question, tell us your name, your company, and role, and then keep it crisp. Let's keep it to a single question. I mean, I love a multi-part, but let's do one question, and we'll try to make it around if you have another one. So have at it. Front row right here, and then someone in the back
Alright.
next. Yeah.
I'm coming around with the mic.
Good morning. Thank you so much for that dialogue. My name is Shazab Lada. I'm the founder of Forte Investment Fund. My point is more of a comment and love for your elaboration. I think it's really the founder's responsibility to be ahead of a lot of these things. And I think it's to do with having the finger on the pulse with regards to what the organization is feeling, to ensure that the funding is in place so that you're not having this monthly kind of gyration of, oh my God, are we going to get paid or not? I'm talking about very much of a startup situation. As well as just the professional health, right? And I think that way too many times we have all these metrics in place, right? Versus kind of that very humanistic approach, right? To really have that chat, right? And say, how are things going? And I think to have that proactive conversation really drives the culture that startups really need. And I think a lot of times we pass on the pressures that the founders have of the next round of funding or whatever to our employees. And I think employees feel it, right? So as a whole, our culture really diminishes, right? So I don't know, your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I think you want the employees that take ownership of your company, right? Like that's a good thing of like, they're so proud to work there that they feel your stress and they want to carry that burden with you. But you're absolutely right that it's the leadership, it's the ownership. It's their job to keep the dialogue so employees feel safe to raise their hand, to hand back projects. I know that that's like a radical idea, but sort of saying like, hey, you put this on my plate, I'm going to hand it right back to you because this isn't going to work for me right now, and here's why, or here's my priority list, and being okay with taking it back, but creating that environment for safe dialogue and the ability for your team members to come to you, and hopefully you'll be able to notice when your stars stop being the one that's speaking in meetings, or maybe turned in a report late or something that they would have never done because your finger is so on the pulse with your team that you're able to notice burnout before it's burnout. Maybe it's just a little spark and you're like, oh no, this is coming. We're going to do no calls after 3 p.m. for 3 weeks and see how that impacts the team or something along those lines. You can kind of avoid it before it's there.
And I think the point you made about it's got to be woven in, right? It can't be when crisis hits, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Okay, take a day off. It's got to be preventative. It's baked into one-on-ones. You've got a really clear sense of what you're driving toward, right? And so I think that's a really important part of the conversation is everyone's really aligned. And when you create that safety and trust, you're actually inviting perspective that's going to strengthen the outcomes, right? You want people to debate. You want people to push back and say, I don't understand how this actually is going to help us deliver this core priority. You're going to get to better solutions by creating that kind of environment. So I love that you mentioned the preventative piece.
I think we had a question back there. Yeah, right there.
Yeah, hi, I'm Anna Welland. I'm a fractional HR consultant. I'm an HR consultant, fractional consultant working with startups, so I'm on the ground. What is your advice to organizations that might be inspired by leaders in the industry who are saying, return to the office 5 days a week, increase your commute by 2 hours each way, and then also memos of, 60-hour work weeks. And if a startup founder or small organization is taking kind of a page out of that as inspiration, and talk about a founder being one of the most burnt out people, how do we move forward from that? What are we learning, and how can we push back?
Oh, I have so many thoughts on this, but I want to pass to you first, Allison.
Man, I mean, I want to say.
We're going to be here all day.
Find another
All day.
job, but I know.
Yeah, do that first.
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to like the world being a wild place, right? Like 5 years ago, it's like, no one's ever going to work in an office again. The future of life is different. And now we're humans and we just go back to what we know. It's like, you know what's good? FaceTime, being in an office for 8 solid hours a day and 2 hours commute on either side. I know every company is different. Like, one, I think FaceTime is incredibly important. Does that mean checking the box? No. I have a different perspective because I think fortunate to be in an organization that even pre-pandemic is incredibly global, and we have our flymates are distributed literally all over the world. So there wasn't a huge switch moving to COVID, and then I think even after, right, we've taken, sorry, but it's the marketer in me, our fly-Brit approach, right? So I think when we're trying to get people together, it's making sure it's purposeful, right? Like, what we want to make sure is that, like, you're hiring people that if they never get to meet someone, like, that's probably a problem, right? Because, like, one, susceptible to burnout, two, how do you get someone really driven and excited about the purpose and the mission? And that togetherness is important for, I think, humans. But I think we're going to see a lot of the same stuff we've seen over the last few years, right? So back to, like, the happy employees. So while right now companies can say, like, well, job market's bad anyway, so back 5 days a week, go there, and employees are going to do so at the moment. I think at some point we'll see that turn again, right, where people have been too rigid are going to be on the losing end. Like, there's so many studies that show that people do their best work when there's flexibility. I've sort of always cared, like, I don't care. I'm not going to ask questions if your job's getting done, right? Like, I don't care if someone's in an office a certain amount of hours a day. I don't think that leads to productivity. But these lovely ladies probably have a lot more on the other types of it, of mandating hours per week, but.
I hear this all the time, especially through our work with Jovial. We have a lot of companies that are like, hey, Amazon just went 5 days return to office. We should do the same thing because they seem to know what they're talking about. And I'm like, no, like, please don't do that. Don't do the 6-page memo either. I think the whole thing is asking, why are you doing it? And what do you think will come out of it if you're going to have everyone go to the office, right? Whether it's 3 days a week, 5 days a week, whatever it is, I think exactly what Allison said, you have to be intentional about what are we doing and why, and how is this going to help us reach our goals, our vision, our mission, whatever it might be. And then we can start to kind of co-create and think about what is the right kind of hybrid policy for us that is going to work for our employees and help them do the best work that they can do. Because, yeah, at the end of the day, like, I could never imagine myself back in an office full-time. I just couldn't do it, right? And I think many people feel the same because we all have lives. We have other things to do, too. And then part of it is the trust factor. And I think you were talking about this as well, is you have to give your employees the autonomy and trust them. And I see it as a sign of a lack of trust from the organization when they say things like, we have to return to the office, you have to badge in and badge out, and we have to track all of these things. We're 15-minute increments, right? And that doesn't breed a good work environment. And I think that's when you question those things. And, you know, to Allison's point, like, get out of there because it's going to be hard to make that better if that's the leadership team's perspective.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hear me? Okay. Hi, my name is Shrikant Shirsagar, and I'm a co-founder of PriorityWise, a business outcomes management platform for startups powered by AI. My question is, you hear all this advice about do's and don'ts of how to prevent burnout in startups, and sometimes it's conflicting, right? So someone says this, then someone says don't do that. So my question, and that's for each one of you, love to hear your perspective on what would you consider is the single most important thing to do in the startup to prevent the burnout and sustain a high-performing team, like, for a sustained period of time?
This is a perfect question because we only got through half our questions, by the way. We could go all day, but this is kind of like what our last question was. So thank you for that. So Allison, maybe you want to start off and we go down the line.
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't think there's one single thing. I think as the founder, it is about awareness. You know, a lot of the advice is around stay well, do the things that you need to do to stay well. Well, that looks and feels different for everybody. So discover what that is, be flexible because it's different for everybody. It's also changing even as an individual, depending on the season you're in. If you're fundraising, that season is going to look and feel a lot different. So it's not about the rigidity to have this perfect formula. I run 5 days a week, I can't miss it. It's really more a consistent check-in, awareness, how you're feeling, and building in recovery periods. I think that's something we miss, right? So if you're in a season of fundraising, I'm going to stick with that one, make sure you're proactively baking in days for rest, it may not be a full day, but can you take a half day? And can you sort of project out and look at your calendar and figure out where, not just for you, but for your team, you can celebrate a small win and actually throttle back. It's not, I'm on this treadmill, and I think where we start to feel really burnt out is when it feels relentless without any light at the end of the tunnel. So making sure you're building in those recovery periods and just consistently checking in with yourself and checking in with your team.
Yeah, that's wonderful. In addition to that, I think it's okay to kill the zombie project. So when you think about those projects that you just keep kicking down the can because it's not a priority, get rid of it. It's arbitrary, it's not going to move the needle, and it's just something hanging over your employees' heads of oh, great, I just successfully completed this project. Oh, now I have to work on this one. But if it wasn't important enough to be a priority in the beginning, it's probably not really a priority, and it's going to be something that employees are going to then work on, and then people are either never going to use, and so it just kind of gets put in the back of a folder, and then that person's pride around that project kind of goes away. So I create a ceremony around killing those zombie projects and being hey, we've moved this now 3 times. We're killing it. It no longer matters. And be okay with that. It's all arbitrary, right? So we have to get permission with being okay that it's arbitrary. And we'll do amazing things, but maybe this isn't one of them and we can get rid of it.
I agree with that one because it's oh yeah, put in maintenance mode. Who wants to work on the maintenance mode projects? That's not exciting for anyone.
Just say stop.
And I think I would say as well, for leadership, setting expectations. I think this is where so many people fall down and fail, right? If you suddenly have these expectations of people of you must be here 5 days a week and working 60 hours, all ridiculous. If you've never stated that, how are people supposed to know, right? So I think oftentimes the not being clear on the expectations, the goals, and that, back and forth, employees are lost. And that's another one, they're lost, and that starts leading to feelings of resentment. And as a leader, again, your role in being clear of what are our mission, what are our goals, what are our priorities, and continuing to set those and reset those expectations.
Yeah, I think just to sum up what everyone said here and come back to what we keep reiterating is you have to pay attention, you have to be aware, not only of yourself, but of your team. So how does your team work best? How can you best support them? Because ultimately, you're all trying to get in the boat and get to the same place. So they all have to be, operating at, their peak performance. And then back to priorities, I think it's really being honest about, are these things important or not, right? I like the corporate speak of fire drills, right? I got a fire drill. I'm where's the fire truck? We get with the alarm off, right? We kind of catastrophize things so much in corporate world. And it's listen, we're all ants here. It's going to be fine. But let's actually prioritize, is this important, right? Is this something that has to be done now? Because what will happen if we don't do it, right? Because I think we don't think about that. We're just doers. But if it's hey, this is a big legal security thing that we need to take care of now, we're going to get sued. Yeah, take care of that. Yeah, put in the extra hours. But if it's something that can wait, then wait, right? And so constantly thinking about those trade-offs and then modeling for your team that you're allowed to think about these priorities and say no to things and bring these up in conversation as well. And so I think we're about out of time. So thank you to everyone. I know Elena's going to wrap it up too, but thank you so much.
That was incredible. I even put it on a sticky note so that I can put it on my mirror when I get home also. Purpose, priority, perspective. Lot of gems, a lot of great takeaways, and fabulous panel. Thank you so much for all of your time and your insight. Again, big round of applause for our speakers. Love it. We do have a lot more in store both today and for the rest of the week. There are a lot of different side events happening throughout the city tonight, so definitely check them out using the link in the Slack channel. And we also have the Massachusetts Climate Tech Studio Finale Showcase, say that 5 times fast, happening this evening as well right here at Suffolk. I know that you guys want to mingle after the sessions and post-event. absolutely want to encourage that. However, I just kindly ask you, do not do it in this room so that I may reset it, clean up, and set up for the next session. Even if your next session is here, I kindly ask that you to pop outside, recheck in with the folks at the registration desk as I quickly reset. If anybody is tuning in virtually, you don't need to go anywhere. Just choose your next session. We'll be back shortly. Lastly and finally, and then I will be all done, Kevin Ty from 3 Circle Studios. I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of the fabulous photographers milling around here. He is our official photographer for Startup Boston Week, so grab him for a photo. You will get a personalized Startup Boston Week photo album to look back on all year. They look amazing on LinkedIn. I've got a collection of pictures. A lot of them, well, it's going to adjust my angles. But info on how to access those, I do have a QR code right here so that you will get notified if ever you've been spotted in rooms or in sessions. Absolutely wonderful. Be sure to do that. He's also taking headshots. So enjoy the rest of the week. Enjoy the rest of your sessions. And thank you again so much to our panelists.
Thank you. Yeah. That was fun.